do the right thing. Now we're going to be shortly joined online by Irgen Salianji, co-founder of Architects for
Irgen, if you're there, please turn your camera on and unmute.
Role. Irgen, are you online? Do we have you online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, open. Irgen, please.
Listen, I can hear you perfectly, and I'm going to hand over the stage to you. Fantastic.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really glad to be part of the convention. I am briefly going to introduce our office, and then I'm going to explain our approach in terms of sustainability, and I will follow that with a series of ontological and existential questions about sustainability and how it is connected to urbanity and cities. Our office is based in Rotterdam in a building called Schieblock. It's basically an office building from the 60s that in the last 2 decades has been hosting a plethora of creative agencies, architects and design offices, etc. And our office is basically a young office focused on competition projects and commissions mostly in the Netherlands, in Albania, in Bulgaria, and in Greece. In the last years, we have developed a wide portfolio of projects, of which, however, only few have made it to become commissions or at least get an award, which makes us think that apparently our business plan is not that sustainable. And the way that we understand sustainability is, of course, linked with the notion of urbanity. We believe in cities. This is our ground of operation, and we think that these two notions are affecting each other. So in the context of our approach, among several options, I'm going to show five approaches linked to projects. So basically, we believe that architecture should engage with the city and create a sense of community. This is our project for the Varna Library in Bulgaria. This is in the interior lobby of the library, where basically we took the typical sort of atrium of public buildings and we distorted it vertically so that it becomes a kind of programmed, man-made urban landscape inside the building, which is extended to the city. And we believe that urbanity, the notion of being urban, nowadays should be compressed and limited to its essentials so that it can give more space for nature and for landscaping. This is our proposal for the Zbraslav Square in Prague. It's basically a small town or a big village in which we defined a square of paved plaza that is big enough to host the urban life, but small enough as well to allow for a ring of landscaping to be developed around it, creating this sort of split condition between the urban and the rural, and giving both possibilities to the residents to experience. And we believe that context can be reimagined and structures can be reused. This is our proposal for the Gwangju Main Library and Cultural Center in Korea, where basically an old incinerator is being transformed into a cultural center, and a library building is added. The way that we organize the scheme is by creating a central square which can kind of receive the cultural flows and activities of both institutions. And although we like to think globally, we believe that we find value in acting locally. This is our seaside hotel project in Durs in collaboration with City Foster, in which we decided to clad the facade with natural stones, which we collected from all over the country, and we used local expertise in installing them. And we believe that it is important to change our habits and not be afraid to adopt technology. This is our proposal for the Irgen Museum in Finland, in which we, for the first time, experimented with CLT timber structure, which is also a local expertise of Finnish industry. But we realize that, unfortunately, as much as we try, by nature, architects, we are not sustainable. And how can we be, considering that almost 40% of the global carbon emissions are related to architecture and the building industry and building related activities. And it is us architects that are designing and building together with our clients glass towers in the middle of the desert. And it is us architects that are creating cities that sometimes are never inhabited. And it is us architects that are designing very expensive stadiums in the middle of the Amazon that are hardly ever used, only for few events. And it is us architects that are proposing and designing and building temporary artificial landscapes which the city councils are refusing to open to the public, and the public is refusing to visit. And it is us, especially Western architects, that cannot even imagine sustainability without thinking of hedonism at the same time. And it is a market in which we operate that is using green and sustainable sort of marketing to increase its profits. But what is its sustainability? And why does it matter, the notion of urbanity? Well, sustainability, if we look at the history of the notion, to sustain our culture, to sustain our way of living, it has not been mentioned through the centuries in the bibliography. It's a notion that has been that appeared in our vocabulary from the 70s on. And of course, it has done so considering the increase of CO2 emissions globally, which have sort of created, impacted the rise of the temperature globally. And this rise of the temperature is, as we can see, is not related to the solar activity. The sun has not become stronger, but it has created the increase of sea level, which in turn sort of is going to affect and endanger our cities. This is a potential future perspective of New York, which makes us think, especially in some cases, we will see, or we have already seen, that the cost of basically saving a city like New York is it can be higher than the value of the city itself in financial terms, and that will create a sort of cultural question like, is it worth it to save our cities, and then which cities are we going to save, and how we're going to do this choice. But if we look at the notion of urbanity in terms of mentions in the bibliography, we see that it was a notion that was used a lot in before the 20th century, and that it has been gradually dropping, and it's hardly used today. It has increased a bit here when our office was founded. And in contrast, on the contrary, the notion of the urban was hardly used before the 20th century, and with the start of the century it has started to increase, and then we see in the post-war period that it has kind of exploded. And today, of course, we are constantly talking about urban renewal, urban regeneration, urban gentrification. The notion, the word urban has been a part of our vocabulary when we talk about the city, which make us think and believe that cities have grown so much in the last decades that it is almost impossible to imagine a holistic vision for the city. We can only speculate on its parts and think of it as a sort of assembly of different parts. And if we have a deeper look on the reasons why cities have grown so much in the last decades, we see that the market, the notion of capitalism and market economy has been also increasing. And if we refer to urban geographers, I would like to refer to David Harvey, one of my favorite urban geographers. He indeed attributes the explosive growth of cities and urban growth and sprawling to the rampant capitalist development, and that has indeed created very severe consequences in terms of social, environmental, and political aspects. And if we look at Mike Davis' Planets of Slum, which basically suggests that and highlights the fact that many cities have grown a lot, but have actually created big inequality and have practically become, let's say, dumping grounds for a surplus population that they themselves cannot absorb. And therefore, if this was a city that we were imagining, then this is what we got. And the division between the privileged and the unprivileged part of cities is, for us, also related to the notion of sustainability and how sustainable can cities be, even in a social and financial level. So therefore, for us, the notion of urbanity and the moment in which cities are experiencing at this point, sustainability is only one part of it, and there are other important aspects that contribute to the growth of the cities and their impact on the environment. So this is a diagram we all know. Since 2010, more or less, the urban population has exceeded the one of the rural, and of course, this has been parallel to the general global population on Earth, which means that basically the dominance of cities and the kind of financial speculation that comes with them has contributed to the overall growth. However, parallel to this urban growth has been also, as we saw before, the climate impact. However, climate is not only is not the only front in which cities and humanity are currently battling, but recently we experienced the consequences and the shock of the COVID-19 pandemic, and basically a unique moment in history in which cities were blocked and they paused to exist as they are usually doing so in terms of density and urban life. And only in few months of urban pause, basically the impact on the climate has been significant, with the ozone sort of dropping globally. And of course, this is a recent a picture from the Canary Islands and the explosion of the volcano, which basically show us that Earth is not necessarily on our side. Earth can undo all of our sort of human intelligence and human capacity to sort of design the landscape and create, let's say, civilization. So the Earth can undo our civilization, and that's sort of another aspect of how we can sustain it that we have to think about. And it's interesting to look at the writings of Nikos Kazantzakis, the Greek Cretan philosopher, in his treatise of Askitiki. He's basically suggesting or realizing that actually the purpose of Earth is not life and it's not man. Earth has existed and will exist without us. And we are just one ephemeral spark. We are just one. Our existence is ephemeral within the, let's say, the violent forces of Earth. However, Kazantzakis also gives a unitary message. So basically, he suggests that we should unite and create and battle this and give human meaning to this almost superhuman struggle against the elements. And this is a painful image for Netherlands. This is a flood of the North Sea in 1953, which caused thousands of deaths and thousands of buildings damaged or demolished. And this is how the Dutch, which have already the experience of battling the elements and specifically water for hundreds of years, and that has basically shaped their culture and the way that they collaborate and that they exist together. And this is the Delta Works, of course, which one of the biggest infrastructural projects, which basically secured the land from flooding again. And similar kind of moments of common action and unification against the elements make possible for cities such as Rotterdam to exist under the sea level. And Rotterdam, of course, is not only existing and surviving, but is even thriving and developing in a way that it makes it a paradigm globally. And recently it has been also switching the attention towards a more green sort of direction for the city. And I particularly like this map of OMA, and basically suggesting that especially nowadays that with the amount of globalization that the world is undergoing, and the sort of decline of the notion of the city, of the national states, notion that is being kind of created and established for the last 2 or 3 centuries, and is almost outdated, could be replaced by a new sort of identification and organization of the map of the world, potentially, but in this case of Europe, in which basically we don't have countries that are sort of identified in terms of nation states, but in terms of the energy source that they produce and the energy source that sort of they can share with the other countries. And another interesting reading is, of course, Harari's statement and realization that for the first time in history nowadays, more people die from eating too much rather than eating too little, and from old age rather than diseases, or more people unfortunately commit suicide than they are killed in war or by terrorism, which means that the Earth is not in such a bad place after all. However, we wonder in terms of sustainability, where should we look for the next radical ideas? Where are the next sustainable ideas going to be born? And I particularly think that the invention and the mass use of the smartphone has sort of changed the way that not only we perceive, understand, and navigate the city, but also the way that we communicate and organize. To the point that nowadays more than half of the population of the Earth is not just connected to the internet, but it's also active on the social media, which gives us a complete new sort of image of the world in terms of communication, in terms of sharing ideas and sharing concern and awareness. And paradoxically or interestingly enough, probably today the vision of Constant for the new Babylon has come closer to existing more than ever. Today we have more time and we work more remotely. We are sort of liberated for the most part, of course, not everywhere and not for everybody, from sort of repetitive work in the factories or sort of on the bureaucratic sector, and we are more than ever sort of becoming the homo ludens, the subject of a city that can travel and can move around and be creative and sort of develop in a more sort of biopolitical sense. And that actually is a question to the cities, like how are the cities going to evolve and how we should design and understand cities under those new conditions. But of course, this connectivity and this advance of technology has produced a rather uninteresting and bizarre urban planning or kind of physical built landscape. This is the case of Tahoe Reno in Nevada, where basically we see a master plan of buildings that are not aimed to people. They are not aimed to human users, but they contain sort of, and they contain the machines that basically provide for this connectivity. And I particularly like the statement of Rem Koolhaas about post-human architecture. So nowadays, and in terms of, let's say, if we look at the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center, there is no history in terms of urban planning. It's purely about technology, engineering, performance, and algorithms. So sort of for the first time, we are producing architecture that is not even aimed to host people and users. And at the same time, for the first time, SpaceX, of course, managed to develop the technology, and now more and more space companies, of course, are providing this possibility for rockets to be reused, which means that a whole new sort of possibility to conquer other planets and expand our civilization has been more and more possible, to the point that we can even imagine or plan cities on Mars, the most unsustainable, the most unwelcoming and difficult planet to inhabit. So basically, I would question, like, if we can even imagine inhabiting Mars in the next few decades, then how difficult will it be for us to solve the problem of sustainability on Earth? Thank you.